right now, somewhere in your kitchen there is probably a bottle of wine or a can of beer. You don't think twice about it, it's just a drink. But the truth is far stranger. The first time a human ever felt drunk, they didn't mean to. Nobody invented alcohol. Your ancestors stumbled into it, and the story of how it happened rewrites everything you thought you knew about being human. Start with your nose. Your body can smell rotting fruit from meters away. Why? Because for millions of years before your ancestors ever built a fire or planted a seed, fermenting fruit was food. And free food. Fruit falls from a tree. It sits in the heat. Wild yeast lands on the skin. The sugar inside starts to break down. And slowly, quietly, it turns into something else. Ethanol. This is not a human invention. It's a natural chemical reaction, older than humans themselves. Biologist Robert Dudley at the University of California, Berkeley has spent years studying this exact question. He calls it the drunken monkey hypothesis. His idea is simple but strange. Millions of years ago, your primate ancestors developed a taste for the smell of alcohol, not because they wanted to get drunk, because alcohol meant ripe, sugar-rich, calorie-dense fruit. Finding that smell in the forest meant survival, so think about that for a second. Long before humans existed, before language, before fire, your ancestors were already sniffing out alcohol. It wasn't a vice, it was a survival skill. Now fast forward, millions of years pass. Your ancestors stand upright, their brains grow, tools appear, and somewhere along the way, someone picks up a piece of fruit that has sat too long in the sun. Maybe it smelled sharp, almost sour, almost sweet. Maybe they were hungry enough not to care. They eat it anyway. And something happens. Their head feels lighter. Their worries feel further away. Their laugh comes easier. They don't have a word for it yet. But they've just become the first human to feel the effects of alcohol. And they didn't discover it in a lab, or a cellar, or a brewery. They discovered it lying on the forest floor, already halfway to becoming a drink. Here's the part that should unsettle you. This wasn't a one-time accident. It kept happening, over and over, for thousands of years, across different continents, different climates, different peoples, with no contact between them at all. Humans in Asia found it. Humans in Africa found it. Humans in the Americas found it. All separately. All by accident. All through the same basic trick of nature. Sugar plus wild yeast plus time equals alcohol. Which raises a real question. If it happened everywhere, independently, again and again, was it ever really an invention at all? Or was it always just waiting to be found? The archaeological evidence backs this up in a way that feels almost eerie. At a site called Reykjavik Cave in northern Israel, archaeologists led by researcher Li Liu of Stanford University found the remains of what looks like deliberate beer making. Stone mortars used to mash grain, soaked and fermented, dated to roughly 13,000 years ago. That's before farming existed, before wheat was domesticated, before permanent villages. Humans were brewing something like beer while they were still hunter-gatherers, wandering, hunting, foraging, not settled, not organized around agriculture, and still, they were fermenting grain on purpose. Let that sink in for a moment. For a long time, the story you were taught was simple. Humans settled down. Humans farmed. Humans then, later, figured out how to make alcohol from their crops. Neat. Linear. Logical. But the evidence suggests the opposite order might be closer to the truth. Some researchers now argue that the desire to keep making alcohol may have been one of the very reasons humans started farming grain in the first place, not bread. It's a strange thought, the foundation of human civilization, the shift from wandering to settling, from foraging to farming, might have been nudged forward by the taste of something fermented. There's more. At a site called Jiahu in China, biomolecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern from the University of Pennsylvania analyzed pottery residue nearly 9,000 years old. Inside those ancient jars, he found chemical traces of a fermented drink made from rice, honey, and fruit, all mixed together. Not a modern recipe, not refined, just whatever sugar sources were available, thrown together and left to sit. And yet, the chemistry lines up perfectly with alcohol production. McGovern has spent decades tracing these residues around the world, and he's found the same pattern again and again. Wherever humans had access to sugar and time, alcohol appeared. Almost like it was inevitable. Now picture what that first taste must have felt like, without any of the context you have today. No word for drunk, no understanding of yeast, or sugar, or fermentation. Just a strange new feeling, a softness behind the eyes, a looseness in the shoulders. Maybe fear faded a little, maybe laughter came faster. Maybe the group sitting around the fire that night felt closer to each other than usual. Because that's the other side of this story. Alcohol didn't just make individual humans feel different. It changed how groups of humans felt together, lowered guards, loosened tongues, shared laughter around a fire that suddenly felt a little warmer. Some anthropologists argue that this social effect, more than the taste, more than the calories, is what cemented alcohol into nearly every human culture on Earth. It wasn't just a drink, it was a shortcut to trust. Think about your own life for a second. Think about a work event, a wedding, a first date, an awkward reunion with family you haven't seen in years. Now imagine a drink is handed around. Shoulders drop half an inch. Conversations start easier. Someone tells a joke that lands a little better than it would have sober. That's not modern. That's not new. That's the same social chemistry your ancestors were running around a fire pit 10,000 years ago without knowing why it worked. Here's the twist that makes this stranger still. The instinct that drew your ancestors to rotting fruit, the one Robert Dudley traced back millions of years, is still sitting inside you right now. Your body still responds to the smell of alcohol the same way it once responded to overripe fruit in the wild. Your brain still lights up the same reward pathways that once told a starving primate, "This is food, this is safe, take it." You're not drawn to alcohol because of advertising or culture or peer pressure alone. You're drawn to it because some very old, very deep part of your biology still remembers what it once meant to survive. So no one really discovered alcohol. Not in the way we usually think of discovery, a flash of insight, a single genius moment. It found humans first. It sat in fruit on forest floors for millions of years, waiting. It hid in grain jars long before anyone called it beer. It sat quietly in pottery in China 9,000 years ago, waiting for archaeologists to notice the residue. And it built something between people that no one fully understood at the time, but that every single culture on Earth eventually carried forward anyway. Right now, somewhere in your kitchen there is probably a bottle of wine or a can of beer. You don't think twice about it. But maybe you should, because that bottle is the end of a story that started long before humans were even human, one accidental taste of rotting fruit at a time.